3 inches, 0.64 thickness, and quarter inch radius. Okay. So, okay, if you want to see the solution, I'm happy to show them to you, but I want to show you the solutions. Okay, what do we have in the solutions? This is what I came up with when I did the bend allowance for the first problem. The 8 to 2 and the 8 and 2 inch, 8 inch and 2 inch L-shaped section. I came up with a bend allowance of 0.170. And I came up with a setback with 0.126. And for the next one, 453, 40 thousandths thick with an 1/8 inch radius, I came up with a bend allowance of 224. And I came up with a setback of 165. And for the next one, 2 8 and 1 inch, 51 thousandths, 15 sixteenths of an inch radius. I came up with, what did I come up with? Bend allowance, 0.526. And setback, I came up with 0.364. 1, 2, 3. And then for the next one, it came up with what? This is gonna be the hat section. I came up with 639 for the bend allowance. And the setback, I came up with 0.447. And for the last one, what I come up with? Bend allowance 437. And setback, I came up with 314. And for the developed width on each of them, well, we'll just go through them one at a time and just kind of show. So, let me just get out of here. Okay. Okay, so for the first one, you've got a bend allowance of 0.170. And what did I tell you again? The setback is gonna be 126. The length of one of the legs is gonna be 7.874. And the length of the other leg is gonna be 1.874. And the total developed width, if you add up all those numbers, should work out to be 9.918. Okay. So that's the overall amount of material to make the part. Where would the line of sight go? Well, it depends on what end is gonna be inside of the brake for bending. If we assume that this is gonna be inside of the brake, that identifies this bend tangent line as the hidden one, you're gonna measure and mark over the equivalent of 1 radius. What radius was used for this bend? 3/32? Yeah, I think it's a 3/32 radius. So, look here, I think that the radius is 0.9375. So, measured and marked from this line, assuming this is gonna be inside the brake, this would be 3/32 or 0.9375 over from it. So that's where the line of sight would go. Okay, so far so good? All right. Okay, for the next one, it's 4 inches, 5 inches, and 3 inches. So it's gonna have 3 flats in it. It's gonna be the Z section. And what I came up with was what? I came up with, the first one is gonna be 3.835. The bend allowance is gonna be 0.224. The next flat is gonna be what? The next flat is gonna be 4.670. And then you got another bend allowance of 224. And then the last flat is gonna measure 2.835 inches. Okay? And, for the lines of sight, where would that be positioned? We'll assume that we'll, put this inside the break first for the first bend, then we'll remove it and put this inside the break for bending. That identifies this line and this line as being the hidden bend tangent lines for bending. And our bend radius, or our bend radius was 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. So, measured and marked over. This is 0.125. And measured and marked from the hidden bend tangent line, 0.125.
So Paul,
Yeah.
the middle one, you have to subtract 2
You have to
setbacks?
subtract 2 setbacks. For every bend, there's gonna be 1 bend allowance that have to be calculated. For every bend, there has to be 2 setbacks. This has got a total of 2 bends. That means 2 bend allowances calculated. It means 4 setbacks have to be subtracted. So the first flat, you're subtracting 1 setback there. The second flat for the 5-inch, you're subtracting 2 setbacks. And then the last flat, just 1 setback. So this flat technically contains, or subtracted 2 setbacks from. Total developed width for this thing, I come up with 11.788. And that works for that. The next one is gonna be, let's see, we got 3 flats as well. The radius is different and the thickness of metal is different, so you have 2/8 and 1 inch for the flats or for the finished dimensions. And, let's see, I come up with 1.636. 1.636. And the bend allowance is gonna be 526. 0.526. The mid flat, again, you're gonna subtract 2 setbacks from that, 7.272. 2. And another bend allowance, 526. And then the last flat is gonna be 0.636. It was only 1 inch for the finished dimensions, but you had to subtract 1 setback, so 636. The finished dimensions for that, I come up with 10.596. Okay. And the lines of sight, the radius was 5/16 of an inch, 3125. So again, we'll assume we'll put this part in the break first, and then we'll put this part in the break for bending. And then we'll measure and mark from here, and we'll measure and mark from here. So the radius was 5/16 of an inch, so that's 3125 from that line. And same thing here, we'll measure and mark up from that hidden bend tangent line, the one that first comes out of the break, 3125. Okay. The next one's gonna be it's gonna be the hat section. It's kind of like the most involved. It's easy to lose track in these things because you have to kind of watch for the setbacks being subtracted in it. And in this one, what did we come up with? Let's see if I can advance the page a little bit to show you what you got. I come up with 16.98 inches for the developed width. And first flat, 1.553, second flat, 2.106, third flat, 5.106, the next flat, 3.106, and the next flat, 2.553. And the bend allowances between them, they're all 639. Where will the lines of sight go? Whichever, you have to identify what's gonna be the hidden bend tangent line, you'll measure and mark out from that. So, let's say that we're gonna put this in the break first. So we'll measure and mark from that line, and just to give you an example, the bend radius is 375. So measured and marked from that line, you'll measure and mark over 0.375. That's where the line of sight's gonna go. Same thing over here, measure and mark over 3/8 of an inch, 375, and that'll give you where the lines of sight have to go. You've gotta be careful also when you bend particular pieces of sheet metal. Let's take an example like a J-framed bracket like that. Years ago, I fabricated some typing stands for some of the secretaries on campus, and so I had to make this, and it was made to hold like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And what I did was I riveted just a piece of sheet metal to it that would work kind of as a stand, so it would stand up kind of tall. When you bent this thing, you couldn't bend it with this in the break first. What you had to do is you had to advance it out of the break. You had to first bend the small flat first, advance it out of the break, and then bend the next flange. If you attempted to make this bend first, you found out that when it came time to make that bend, this long leg section interfered with completing the 90-degree bend because that particular flat was too long. It hit the frame of the break as you were bending it. So sometimes you have to think, especially when you've got parts like this where you've got a very narrow J section between the flats. The problem is you're not able to just do the bends any old which way you want to. You kind of have to pre-plan which bend has to be done first. So what I did is I bent this flange, advanced it out of the break, and then made that flange. And I didn't have to worry about this part of it coming in contact with the frame of the break as I completed the bend. I was able to complete it. Okay, so just kind of something to think about. The last one. Let's see. You got 8 inches, 2 inches, and 3 inches for the finished dimensions. 6.686 for the first one. And you had a bend allowance of 437. And you had another flat of 1.372. And you had another flat of 2.686. And the lines of sight, just like with any of them, you're gonna locate them one radius from the hidden bend tangent line. So whatever is slid in the break first, it identifies that line as the hidden one. The radius that you're using is 1/4 of an inch, 0.250. So measured and marked from that line, you're gonna measure and mark over a 1/4 inch, 250. And that's where the line of sight will be. Okay, so that's how it's done. The easy thing to make a mistake with is not subtracting the correct number of setbacks or not adding the number of bend allowances that you require for the problem. So it's very easy to make a mistake. I check this work, and even sometimes checking it, I make a mistake or two. But I'll see what you guys came up with. Don't worry if you're 1/1000th or 2/1000ths off or 2/1000ths off. The rounding is going to make a little bit of a difference in my answer versus yours. But if you're something like 15/1000ths off or 20/1000ths off, there's a definite problem someplace along the line. Hopefully you also remember too, you can check your developed width against the finished dimension. Your developed width should always have a smaller value than the finished dimension of the part. If it comes up to be a larger value, you know that your answer is incorrect. So just kind of look at that. What I also do too, since I worked all of the numbers out for the empirical formula for bend allowance, verify your answer against a chart that shows you bend allowance to see if you've got the same answer. If you don't have the same answer, there's something wrong. Okay, so at least look at the table to kind of figure out what you need to do. So I think it's good practice. You know, when you're working as a mechanic, you're going to have to possibly bend sheet metal. And again, if you have to make anything with more than one bend in it, you just can't make the part oversized and hope that the bend is going to be positioned where you want it to be. You have to kind of figure out mathematically where the dimensions have to be for bending to give you the leg length sections that are required for the part. If you've got just one bend in the part, no problem, I can bend it as long as I observe some rules of the road, and cut the excess off. But if you've got two bends in the part, like a U channel or a J shape or a half section, you're gonna go through tons of metal before you finally get a part to looks like what you want it to be. Okay. So, again, just be aware. Okay,